Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, part 3 of our Dell R710 server update series. Yesterday we had the drive cables come in. As you know, we've got that new H700 SAS controller for that server. And we got the controller in, tried to install it, and ended up we had the wrong cables. So those cables came in today. They weren't inexpensive. That's the most I've ever paid for 2 cables in my life, was $32 for 2 drive cables. But you know, in enterprise level equipment, that's what you get what you pay for, as they say. So let's get the video started and show you what we've done with that. The cables have come in, and here's what they look like. They have a straight end on one end, and then the right angle connector on the other that goes right like this into that connector. So these cables are about 30 inches long, so they're going to reach to the controller, which I have now installed. This is the H700 controller. It is in its slot. It is firmly plugged in and ready to be hooked up. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the cables, plug everything in, and we'll continue on from there. But I just wanted to show you. Here's one, and here's the second cable. So I'm going to go ahead and get those installed, then I'll do another shot once I actually have the cables installed. Alright, so the cables are in. There's a SAS A, SAS B. They go back behind this little plate here. The power cable for the battery is plugged in, and there's the 2 SAS connectors right there, kind of tucked down. And I'll probably end up wire tying these over to the side or something to keep them from impeding on the coverage. You can see they stick up a little bit. Now the true test, and that is to apply some power and see if the controller still allows this Dell to boot, and it's going to be loud when it does. So I'm going to reassemble and plug it in, and we'll make sure the controller comes up. So everything's hooked up though, and if I've done my job right, it should work, and it should see the SAS backplate. And alright, so here we go. We got it all back together. We had a little trouble booting initially. So I wiggled the cables around, made sure they were seated properly, and let's see if the error has gone away now. It sees our processors, it sees our Broadcom card, and now here is the RAID controller. Let's see if it sees our devices. %, sees 3 virtual disks. That's what we were after. Now let's see if the sucker boots into Windows. And hopefully I won't have to do a reload. Our SAS cable A, or integrated controller, is missing. Well, SAS cable A or SAS integrated cable is missing. Power down, check configuration details for storage cabling. I think that may have been a previous error, because as you see, it is booting, and it appears to be booting. I don't see any hard drive activity though. That's kind of odd. We will see. It says SAS cable A failure. It appears to be trying to boot. So we will just let this. Yeah, your PC ran into a problem, needs to restart. We'll restart it for you. Inaccessible boot device. Okay, it's going to reboot. 100%. Sees the 3 virtual drives. Okay. I'm waiting for it to give me that SAS cable error again. Error SAS cable A or SAS integrated controller is missing. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to figure this one out. Alright, so we seem to have figured out what the error was. I had SAS cable A plugged into B and B plugged into A. I've switched them around and it is booting a lot quicker, and the SAS cabling error has gone away, and hopefully now I can get it to boot into Windows. Now, everything I read on this said all I should have to do is replace the controller and it should boot right into Windows, but like I said, I had the cables flipped around the wrong way. It does see the 3 virtual drives, and so hopefully it should boot, and then I just have to figure out how to clear the error. It did try to boot into Windows. It ran Windows Repair, and then I told it to go ahead and boot into Windows, and so now it's rebooted and hopefully going to boot into Windows. We shall see. There's my iDRAC coming up. Sorry about the handheld, but I wanted to do this quick and dirty. Okay, so now it's going to try and boot into Windows, and my little flashing red light in the back has gone out. Let's check the panel on the front, and it is once again blue. So it is happy, and it's trying to boot into Windows. So hopefully Windows Server 2016 repaired itself. If not, worst case, I'll have to reload Windows. No biggie. I say no biggie, but yeah, it needs to restart. Okay, well, I'm going to need to focus on trying to repair Windows, and I think it's going to bomb because it's a controller error, so this may be catch-22. I may have to load this from scratch, but I'll come back and let you know what solution I found. So we have successfully installed the H700 card. We've learned the difference between the A side of the controller and the B side of the controller, because when I initially connected this, I had the B cable plugged into A and A plugged into B. And I'm still not real happy with the way these cables work. Let me give you a close-up and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So here's what I'm talking about on the cables. And again, I'm not real happy with the way they turned out. As you can see, these are straight cables, and I'm having to bend them at quite an angle to get them in there. And then I have to run them over here to the side, and then they go up into that little tray there, and then along back to the back plane here as I zoom out. So they work great on the back plane. They have little right angle connectors and they work perfectly. But again, I'm not real happy with how they turned out here on the system board, but it is what it is. So now the next thing I need to do is I need to take this riser out. I of course have the power turned off right now, but I need to take this riser out because I'm going to be installing this little gem right here. And this is a Mellanox SFP network card, 10 gig card, as part of the update to this Dell server. And then then I've got a couple of additional hard drives, 1 terabyte hard drives I'm going to put in there. And then that will, for all intents and purposes, complete the updates for this server. As far as what I'm planning on putting in it right now. Now that may change, but for right now that's what I'm planning on. Alright, so let's get this Mellanox card installed. And I think both of these, now I just need to press this blue button here and then pull up on the riser card. And I think both of these are 8X slots. They are. So they have this one and this one, and it says clearly on the printed circuit board here that they're both 8x slots. So now the other thing I need to do is remove one of the slot covers, like so. And then I'm going to leave that out while I put this Mellanox card in here. Think you can see it? Yes, you can. Now I'm going to leave the SFP cover on it until I'm actually ready to use it. So okay, it looks good. Looks like I've got it in there, and I got the riser back in, so hopefully that that will work. Let me run over and get the I mean, I can go ahead and power it on now. I do need to put the fan back in the shroud, and then I'll go ahead and boot it up with the cover off, give you an idea how loud this thing is without the cover on it. Normally this is a very quiet server, but when you don't have the covers on, or you don't have the main cover on properly, it gets a bit noisy. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and plug the power cables in. I'm not going to install the two 1 terabyte hard drives yet. I already have 2 in there, so let's get a taste for how loud this thing is. Yeah, a little loud, huh? So if you pay attention to the second one here, that's a power edge controller. Once it initializes, you'll see it is the PERC H700 12.10.6. We need to upgrade that to 12.10.7. And 3 virtual drives found, and then it should boot. There's a Mellanox network card that I just put in there. So we should see booting into Windows here momentarily. And there we are, booting into Windows. So that's a good sign. It's always good when that stuff works, huh? Then again, I've repurposed this this cart for this thing. Let's see if I can reach the cover. Now that we know the Mellanox card is going to work, I'm going to go ahead and put the cover back on, and then this thing will get a little more quiet. And you'll see once I get the cover closed now that it should quiet down quite a bit. You can hear the fans ramping down now. And then once you have the once the fans ramp down, it's a fairly quiet server, so very happy with it. I already have 2 1 terabyte drives in this unit. I want to add 2 more, and so I've got a couple of drive sleds here for this Dell. And then I've got the two drives over here. They're both Hitachi 1 terabyte drives, and one of these was one of the drives that we tried in that FreeNAS server that I ended up not keeping. So we know one of these, both of these drives are from they're from 2011, I believe. They're 3 gigabit per second, so they're only serial ATA2 drives. And they are back from, well, I don't know, but when we hook them up into the server, we'll find out when they're back from. Now these hard drive sleds have, on one side, they have clear markings. They're for SAS, serial ATA. Make sure you can see that. Make sure I'm not pointing to something you can't see. I'm not going to close in onto it, but trust me, they have little markers that say serial ATA or SAS. And what you have to do is you have to mount the drive hole, the rear one, and line it up with this SAS screw here. Not this, you would think the serial ATA, but no, it has to go back to the SAS screw. So I'm going to go ahead and you have to have special screws for these. So I'm going to go ahead and mount these. Both these drives were manufactured in February of 2011, and so they're both about 6-7 years old now. Okay, I'm not going to take video of you watching me put screws into hard drives. What I'll do is I'm going to cut the video here, and I'll come back when I'm ready to install the drives and set them up through the RAID control, and we'll get some shots of that screen. So you're probably wondering, why are we going to all this trouble to put this nice new controller in here and then not use fast hard drives? Well, I don't have fast hard drives to use, so you have to use what's at hand. So you can see right here, this is the PERC H700 integrated controller. I already have a virtual disk that is in RAID 1, and that is my boot drive. That's the 2 SAS drives. And then I've got 2 1 terabyte, nearly 1 terabyte drives in there. They're set up as virtual disks, as RAID 0, so the controller just basically passes them through. And then if we arrow down here, we have 2 unconfigured physical disks right here. Both of them are ready. So what I want to do is add them as standalone drives. So it's just a simple matter of coming back up here to the controller, hitting the F2 key, and creating a new virtual drive. And then I need to tab down to the individual drive, put an X on it, and we'll call this VD3, Virtual Disk 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the last one in there. So we'll go ahead and select the drive, called Virtual Disk 4, tab over to OK, tell it OK, and then exit the controller and reboot. And then when that comes back up, we should see a total of 5 virtual disks in there. So we're booting up, and hopefully, if all is done right, we should see it's initializing the controller now. We should see it come up and identify the controller as an H700. And then we should see a total of 5 virtual devices. 1 RAID 1 array, and then 4 RAID 0 or virtual hard disks pass through to the operating system. So there's the PERC controller, 5 virtual drives found, and then we should see the Mellanox driver or firmware come up here for the Mellanox 10 gigabit network card. There it is, Connectix Flex Boot. Okay, and then it should pass on and should boot up and initialize the iDRAC. So now we can actually, once the server Windows comes up, we can actually move over to the PC, and I can show you some more on this server. So there you go, hardware is all installed now. We did have a little trouble. I plugged serial ATA, or I plugged SAS 1 into SAS 2, but once we got those flipped around, everything was fine. Now, I had read online that this controller would just adopt the hard drives that were out there from the other controller, and they should work fine. I thought that was the case. I went to boot into Windows, but it would never boot into Windows Server successfully. So instead of wasting a bunch of time trying to do a repair, I decided to blow away that installation of Windows Server 2016 and do a fresh install from a USB key. Now, all I've done is a fresh install. I have not loaded any Dell drivers. I've only loaded the drivers that come with Windows. I've done all the updates on Windows Server 2016, and all seems to be working well. In fact, the big test for me is to test to make sure I can get 100 megabyte or 100 megabit transfer speeds over my network adapters from my NAS, and I can. I've done that test and it's working fine. I also installed the Mellanox 10 gig network card in there, and so what we're going to do is load drivers for that. And the other thing I did was I also added 2 additional 1 terabyte spinning hard drives in there, and we need to add them to our drive vendor pool. So that's what we're going to do next. So again, when I did my install of Windows Server 2016 on this Dell server, I don't use any Dell drivers because Dell doesn't have drivers for Server 2016. So I just use the ones that are built into the Windows operating system. And since I had to reload Windows Server, I went ahead and gave this machine a new name. It's called MCS-Lab1. I just didn't do this a minute ago. Go to Properties, and let's go to Device Manager, and you'll see I have no cautionary tales other than probably even the Mellanox is not. So all of my device drivers are installed. I got a basic display adapter. Let's see. Network adapters, so there's the QLogic, all the gigabit adapters. There's the Mellanox Connect X2 Ethernet adapter, and that is using a driver provided by Mellanox from 410 of 2016. So if it's good enough for Windows, it's good enough for me. And then the storage controller, the PERC H700 integrated. That driver is coming from Dell from 2016. I do need to do a firmware upgrade on this PERC controller. We'll do that here as well. But I just want you to see these are out of the box drivers with Windows, a basic install, and all the updates done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a transfer test. I'm going to go out and I'm going to copy from my NAS to my local drive vendor drive pool, and we'll see what kind of speeds we get. There we go. Alright, so we're getting about 120 megabytes per second, which is good. That's what I expected. Now this is out of the box configuration, no special drivers, nothing. Now keep in mind, when I initially set up these Dell servers, I went out and downloaded the all of the updates from Dell concerning BIOS and iDRAC controller. All those drivers were done, updates were done all at one time. So I just wanted to see for myself that this was still going to have really good transfer speeds before I did anything to the SCSI controller, which is what we're going to be doing next. That worked extremely well, so we're going to call that a success. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to add these 2 drives to the drive vendor pool. So I need to go into, let's see, Windows Administrative Tools. I want to go into Computer Management. Now what I'm going to do is go out and I'm going to format these 2 drives that I added as an REFS file system. As you can see, I've got DB1 and DB2 already in there. They're formatted as REFS. You notice they don't have any drive letters associated with them, and that's because I let Drive Vendor associate those drive letters. So I'm going to delete this volume here, get rid of that, and then I need to delete these volumes. So we'll just let you come along for the ride because I need a clean hard drive to install or to make it available to Drive Vendor. So we'll get rid of all these little This was part of a Synology or an Exynology RAID array. Okay, then being consistent with DB1, DB2, I'm going to name this DB3 and this one DB4. So I just right click on it, I do new simple volume. The wizard pops up. I'm not going to install a drive letter. I'm going to format them as REFS and do a quick format, and this will be DB3 for drive vendor 3. Next, finish. Now you notice it assigned a drive letter even though I told it not to. Don't worry about that, we'll come back to that later. I'm going to go ahead and right click. Wonderful Windows, huh? I told it no, you saw me. I selected no drive letter, just like I did here. Do not assign a drive letter or path, and it just totally ignored what the hell I told it to do. So take that, Windows. Next, finish. And it assigned drive letter D to that one as well. Now it'll fix that on its own here in a minute after it's done formatting, and if we do a little refresh, it'll eventually get rid of the D. Why it shows it there in the first place, I don't know, but it does. And now it's gone. So now I have 4 1 terabyte drives in there. So now let's go into Drive Vendor. Alright, so here's my Drive Vendor drive pool, and now I want to let's launch the pool wizard. Add a new drive to an existing pool. Good, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with DB3. Next. Enable volume renaming and let it manage the drive letters, and then I'm going to add it. Meanwhile, all my data is live on my drive pool. This is why I like Drive Vendor. Completed successfully. Would I like to add another one? Oh, sure. And we'll add the 4th one to it as well. Next, add. Yes. And no, because that's the last drive I have to add. Okay, so now we have our Drive Vendor. We have 4 drives in our Drive Vendor drive pool. Alright, so we have successfully installed the SAS controller. We've successfully installed the Mellanox 10 gig network adapter. We've joined this unit to the domain. We've got all our hard drives installed. We've got Drive Vendor installed, and now I'm actually doing some disk copy test. I'm doing some data copying test to make sure those drives are going to be reliable for what I want to use them for. So we'll let that test run while I come back and discuss the next steps. So this unit behind me now, for all intents and purposes, is ready to go back into the rack. And you're probably wondering a couple things. One, why I put the controller in there I did for the SAS drives, and I explained that I want to be able to use 6 gigabit SAS and serial ATA drives, and I couldn't do that with the other controller. And then I was limited on the SSD support I had as well, so or larger hard drives into that unit should I see fit in the future. And then the Mellanox 10 gigabit connector, I bought 2 of them. One for this server and one for my my regular Dell production server. And we're going to be ripping into that one because I need to do the same updates to that one that I just did to this one. You ever had a day you're just not with it? I'm having 2 of those days today. So the other thing I'm going to need to do on this new unit, now that I've got all the hardware squared away on it, is I'm going to need, this was my Windows Lab virtual machine that hosted all those Windows Lab machines. So what I'm going to need to do is go back into Veeam and do a restore. And then I had also created another virtual machine on here to do a demo for another product, another Windows product. So I'll need to also restore the image for that. So I have Veeam connected or up and running on my workstation right now, and you can see we have a problem. MCS HV does not exist anymore. So the first thing we need to do is come up here and remove that server from the console, and I'm going to tell it yes. And hopefully it'll work. It's going to try and connect to the old hypervisor, and it's going to find that it's not there, but it's going to delete it with warnings, so we should be okay there. Now what I want to do is add a server, because I need to add this new server back. So its domain name is mcs-lab1. And we'll click on next, and this is a Microsoft Hyper-V standalone server. I already have my credentials in there, so I'm going to use those credentials. And it's going to go out and it's going to see if there are any of the components on there. This is the beauty of Veeam, is that once it's set up correctly, it handles installing and removing the transport and Hyper-V integration services. So now I'm just going to go ahead and click on apply. Now keep in mind on that server, if I bring that up, bear with me a second, if I bring that up, you'll still see I have a copy job going on, and it doesn't matter. That's why we have an enterprise level server, so it really doesn't matter all the tasks I'm doing in the background on this thing. And then eventually Veeam will have a successful conclusion here. Success. Server has been saved successfully. So let's click on next and then finish, and then we should be able to connect to Lab 1. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and restore my lab server to this server, to this new Hyper-V. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to the computer, and I'm going to cancel this copy. We'll do this later, so that I have nothing interfering with restoring those virtual machines. And then we'll come back over here to Veeam. And then if I go to Home, I should be able to choose Restore. And then I need to browse to where I store those Veeam backups, which is on my NAS. Now, what I need to do is restore the lab server first. So there it is. It's a 2016 lab domain controller 2017 that I backed up on 12/22. So I'm going to open that, and it takes a minute to read that file. Okay, now, so it tells me the total VM size when the image was taken, which is 27 days ago on the 22nd, and contained VMs is 2016 Lab 1. So I'm going to do a restore, but I am going to and I'm going to choose the entire virtual machine. All right. Now I'm going to select that virtual machine again, click next, and I can't restore to the original location because it doesn't exist anymore. So I need to restore to a new location or with different settings. So I'll click that, click next, and now I need to find the host. And you see it says no target host or cluster. So I click on this little button here called host, and I'm going to put that on MCS Lab 1. And then it's going to go out and it's going to look for the default. When I installed Hyper-V, you install it with some default data directories. So that's what it was looking for. So what it's going to do is it's going to restore the configuration files. It's going to restore to P virtual machines, and then the 2016 Lab 1, it's going to restore to P virtual machines VHD, which is fine. And then we need to give it a network to connect to, and I've created a switch over on that new lab, and it should be called Subnet 5, and it is. So we're restoring from LAN Subnet 5 to LAN Subnet -5. Next. We're going to preserve the VM unique ID. Not going to worry about that. Next. And then it should give us a summary of what it's going to do. And we'll go ahead and click on Finish. Now we'll wait for that to start running. And then we'll switch over to the virtual machine, to the to the RDP connection, and we'll see where it starts restoring the data to. All right. So now we should see that there is reading and writing going on to that hard drive, and there is. So the Veeam backup and replication has started to restore the file. And we'll let that run, and we'll come back when that's successfully completed. I just wanted you to see the IOPS and the write speed as it's writing that data to that array. So according to Veeam, the restore was completed successfully. So let's switch over to that lab machine, and let's bring up Hyper-V Manager, and right there it is. And let's see if we have a virtual machine under Hyper-V Manager now for the lab. And there we do. There's a 2016 lab. If I go to settings, let's see. One thing I want to make sure of is that under the network adapter, yep, it's got VLAN 20 on there. If you remember when we went and set up those VLANs. And the hard drive is in its correct machine, so it looks like it was all good. So the next thing to do is go ahead and restore the other virtual machines that were on this server and get them staged. And no need to have you watch me do all those restores, but we'll come back when they're done. So there you go. We have installed now, finally, the H700 SAS controller. We have installed the 2 new cables that we got that we had to pay $32 for. And in the meantime, when those cables came in, my other controller came in for my production Dell, the other Dell we're going to be doing. And lo and behold, they sent the right cables, so I don't have to spend $32 on another set of cables. At least I think they sent the right cables. Now, one major boo-boo I made. And I pointed it out in the video. I put a little blurb in there, a little title in there that told you pay attention because this connector was not connected. So what I did was one connector was not plugged in, and then I had the SAS A and B switched. And then instead of following my own advice and stopping and verifying that I had the cables plugged in correctly, I told Windows to go ahead and do a repair. And of course the Windows repair failed, and then I got into, even though I corrected the cables a few minutes later and got them right, the damage had already been done to the Windows installation. So I made the decision at that point to go ahead and reinstall Windows Server 2016. So, because everything I've read on this controller is that I should just be able to plug my drives in and Windows should work fine. It should see the new drive, it should see the old drives out of the old array and work just fine. And that was the case. If I hadn't had the cables installed wrong, I probably wouldn't have this problem. Now the reason that's important is because I'm getting ready to do this same thing on my other Windows 2016 server, that other Dell that's in here. That's my production machine. And like an idiot, I did not virtualize my domain controller. I changed my domain controller from a virtual machine back to a physical machine, and in hindsight, I was playing around with things. I should have left that domain controller as a virtual machine. It would have been a heck of a lot easier. So I'm going to try to convert that Windows Server 2016 domain controller to a virtual machine before I do what I'm going to do to it. And that is the same thing I did to this one. And that Dell, production Dell, will then get a Mellanox 10 gig card in it put inside of it as well. And then there will only be a link between the two Dell servers. And so that brings me around full circle as to why I'm replacing the controllers on these things. I want to be able to use larger, faster hard drives. I want to be able to use SSD drives without limitation, that kind of thing. And then I want to be able to quickly transfer virtual machines between the two units to do transfers. That's why I'm putting the 10 gigabit connectors only in those two servers. I'm not putting a Mellanox adapter into my NAS unit, because what I'm eventually going to be doing is building a SAN unit out of one of these two units, and it'll have the two 10 gigabit connectors between the two servers, so that I can do very fast file transfers or do things like iSCSI, maybe host all the virtual machine images on one server and have the other one just kind of be for Hyper-V. So that's a plan anyway. Now, I'm not gonna do a shout out to the people that have donated on this video. I'll do it in another video because I don't have their names at my disposal. But the donation fund for you remember I told you I want to buy a Synology NAS, right? And the one I want is $600. So far, we've had over $300 worth of donations. I am very grateful to all of you. We have earmarked that money for the Synology NAS. So if you want to contribute to that cause, $5, $1, $10, whatever, either go over to PayPal and donate, or you can donate by becoming a Patreon member to help support the page. And just make sure when you do your donation, you earmark it for the Synology fund. Once we get up to about $4 or $4.50, then I'm going to make up the difference in purchasing that Synology NAS. So that'll be fun. Once we get that in here, we can start playing around with some of the Synology software. So there you go. That is going to end this series of videos for this Dell R10 server, R710 server. We're going to put it back into the rack and start. I've restored all the virtual machines on it, so our Windows lab is back up and running. And then we're going to tackle the other Dell servers, or the other Dell server, and then we'll do a separate video on connecting the two of them up with the 10 gigabit connection. So I don't know that the next video on the next server is going to be 3 parts. It'll probably be 1 or 2. Now that I have it down how to do it, it shouldn't take quite as long. So we hope you found this video informative and entertaining. As always, give us a thumbs up down below. Your comments in the comments section. Subscribe, hit that like button, please. We can use all the help you can give us. We have passed the 2,000 subscriber mark before my birthday, which is Monday. Thank you all so much. It is so greatly appreciated. All of you that came over from Morton at my playhouse, thank you for that as well. We got the packages sent off to Morton. They should be there next week. However, one of the packages got returned because for some reason the U.S. Postal Service, even though I told them there are no batteries in it, seems to think there are batteries in it, and they won't let it get on an airplane until I fill out another piece of fricking paperwork. Thank you, U.S. Postal Service, for that information. So anyway, leave your comments in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed the video, like I said. And don't forget, we will see you on the other side.